Hi, boys and girls. Our story today is called Unlucky Jimmie. Our story took place a long time ago, and little Jimmie, he was standing out on the street in front of the big tenement building where he lived. He stood there and he was thinking, I'm the most unluckiest boy in the whole wide world. Well, that day had not been very lucky for him. Matter of fact, it had been awful. He had had his one glass marble, and he had been playing with it out in the street, and it had rolled right down into the sewer drain. There was no way of getting it out, and it was the only one he had. And once again, he said to himself, I'm the most unluckiest feller that ever lived. Well, he did have some reasons to be kind of down in the dumps. It was terribly cold outside. And there he stood, shivering in the cold. Now, he should have had warm socks. He should have had warm underthings, but he didn't have any of that. And his pants were holey, and his coat was thin. But there was nobody to buy him more. His father was out of work. Ain't I the most unluckiest boy that ever lived? Well, he started walking down the street, and then he saw other boys and girls racing down the streets to their big houses, all decorated for Christmas. And he thought, they're going home to eat supper. I need to go home to eat supper. But he remembered what he'd had for lunch, the same thing that he had for days. One piece of bread with a little butter on it. And supper's only variety would be one piece of bread with maybe a little bit of jelly on it. No butter, of course, because they couldn't have both. Oh, well. So he turned around and he started to walk toward home. Home in that big tenement building where hundreds of families lived. It was cold, it was dirty, it was falling apart. He went up that dark staircase, and the only thing that seemed to brighten his thoughts was the fact that he could go see Jean, his little sister. Now, Jean was sick in bed. Well, the next day, he got up and he went out in the street. There was no place to really play. So he always just went out to the streets and wandered around. Pretty soon, he'd come to the place where there were store windows, and he saw the toy store. Oh, the stuff inside of that window would make any boy's heart beat pounding. Oh, look at all that pretty stuff. He saw stuff for Jen. He saw stuff that he had always wanted. And then he went. Then he watched the other children as they came out the door of the toy store. Underneath their arms, they had wrapped brown packages or brown sacks full of treasures. And they excitedly and happily, in their nice warm coats, went on their way home. Well, Jimmie, he stuck his hand in his pocket. It was warmer that way. But then he thought about something. He felt around in his pocket. It was still there. And he pulled out the coin. 1 copper penny. Oh, just 1 penny. He knew that nothing in that toy store would cost a penny. He wanted to buy his little sister Jen something. But what could you get for a penny? Well, he didn't know what to do, so he wandered away from that toy store. Didn't do any good to look at it, he thought. And then suddenly he looked up. There was somebody coming. Oh, there was a well-dressed lady, and she was walking down the street. And she came right up to him, and she bent down to his level. And she said, "Are you Jimmie McKay?" And Jimmie went, "Yeah." He just stood there looking at her, and she smiled ever so kindly at him. And she said, "Well, Jimmie, your name is on a list at our church. And we're going to have a Christmas party next week on Thursday. And we want you to come." He didn't know what to say. "Me?" And she said, "Yes, we want you to come. And here's an invitation. It's actually a ticket. You have to have the ticket to get in to the party, but the address and everything is on it, and you have been invited." Jimmie went, "Oh, wow." That was all he could think to say. And then he thought of something else. He said, "Ma'am, I have a little sister. Maybe she'll be well by next week. Can she come to the party with me? She'd really like to, I know." And the lady's face got sad, and she said, "We can only take one child from each family. I'm sorry, Jimmie. Maybe Jen can come next year." And she walked away. Jimmie, he looked down at that, and then he got an idea. What if, just what if he could stay home and his sister could go to that party? He knew she'd love it, and part of him suddenly got excited. And then he looked at that ticket, and it said, "Admit the bearer." That meant whoever had the ticket, Jimmie McKay only. Oh, he thought, "I guess she can't come." Oh, and he was sorry. He would have loved for his sister to have gotten to go as well. Or he would be more than glad to let her go in his place. But I guess that wasn't to be. Well, the next week, when Thursday came, he was all excited. I don't know if he told Jen about the party or not. He might not have, thinking it would make her sad. But he did go to the sink, that basin water that they had, and he had washed the dirt off of his face, and he'd washed his hands, and he'd brushed his coat off. He wanted to look the best he could look. And he set off. He went down that staircase and down the street, several streets away, to a nice neighborhood. And there in front of him was the address, a beautiful house all decked out for Christmas. He just couldn't believe it. Look at those pretty lights. Oh, look at the wreaths. And oh, he went up to the door and he so carefully, he knocked on that door. And pretty soon a lady came to the door and she said, "And who might you be?" He said, "I'm Jimmie McKay. I, I have a ticket to come to this party." She said, "You sure do. You come right in." Well, the house was full of children. And the first thing they did was all of those children were set down at a big long table. Jimmie had never seen so much food in one place. There was enough food on that table to have fed his family for weeks. And he was told he could eat as much as he wanted. Oh, he had some of this and some of that and some of that. And he ate and he ate and he ate till he thought he would explode. Oh, it felt so good to be full. And then those ladies said, "Come in the other room now. We're going to play games." And they did. They had so much fun that Jimmie McKay almost forgot to think about him being the unluckiest boy there ever was. Well, they played games and they played games. And finally, the lady, she came in and she clapped her hand and she said, "Boys and girls, now I want you all to come with me. We're going to have Christmas presents now." Christmas presents on top of all this, games and food and desserts. And Jimmie couldn't hardly believe it. But he followed the lady into a room that was lit with a Christmas tree, a big Christmas tree. And hanging on that tree were toys that every boy or girl would love to have. And all under that tree was toys. Then a lady stood up, and Jimmie recognized her as the lady that invited him to the party, the lady from the street. And she said, "Now, boys and girls, Mrs. Smith, she is going to read out your names one at a time. You all stay seated now. When she calls your name, you can come up to the Christmas tree and pick one present to take home with you for your very own." Oh, the kids couldn't imagine, because all the children that were there were all from the poor tenement buildings. They all knew what it was to be hungry, and they all knew what it was not to have Christmas. And here this lady said they could actually have something for their very own. Well, they couldn't hardly sit still, and Jimmie included. He just wanted to wiggle. He was so excited. And he looked at that Christmas tree. What did he want? And as his eyes ranged all over that tree, he saw something. All of his little boy life, he had wanted a red fire engine, and there was one hanging on that Christmas tree. Oh, now he really couldn't wait. What if somebody else chose it before it was his turn? Oh, Well, it seemed like it was hours, but it really wasn't, till that lady called, "Jimmie McKay, it's your turn." And Jimmie, he shot out of his chair, just like a cannonball out of a cannon. And he rushed over to that lady, and she said, "Now, Jimmie, you can have one thing off of this Christmas tree, one thing to take home for your very own. What would it be?" Jimmie looked at that tree. Then he saw that fire engine again. Oh, that was what he wanted. Oh, he wanted it so bad. And he looked up at the lady and he said, "Ma'am, most of all, better than anything, I'd like that red fire engine." But he didn't stop there. He swallowed. And then he said, "But I think I'll take that doll over there." And he pointed at a dolly sitting on the branches of the Christmas tree. When he looked up at the lady, he recognized her as the lady who had invited him to the party. And she bent down really low to him and she said, "I understand. God bless you, Jimmie." And she went and she got the doll and she gave it to Jimmie. Jimmie stuffed it under his arm and he started to go back to his seat. And then the kids erupted. They yelled and they hooped and they hollered and they went, "He's a boy and he wanted a doll. He's a sissy." And they went on and on and on. It was like the ladies couldn't make them be quiet. And Jimmie, he went and sat down in his seat. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up with that doll. He grabbed his little hat and he grabbed his raggedy coat. And he went out that front door, leaving all the kids to the rest of the party. And the fire engine to who knows who. He got out on the street again and he started walking quickly and he thought to himself, I'm the most unluckiest fella." Then he thought of something. He happened to look down and he saw that doll under his arm. And with the other hand, he took her out and he held her. She was cute. He knew Jen would love her. And deep down inside of his heart, he didn't think about being unlucky anymore. He didn't think about that fire truck. He thought about how happy he would make his sister that night. So he hurried quickly to get home. He climbed those old rattly stairs again to their apartment. And he went inside. It was pretty dark inside. He went to that bedroom in the back where his sister was laying sleeping. Or he thought she was asleep. He knew she was pretty sick. Then he heard a little voice said, "I'm glad you've come back, Jimmie. I get so lonely here by myself." And then little sister sat up and she said, "Jimmie, what's that under your arm? Is that for me?" Jimmie, he stuck out that dolly to Jean and he said, "It's for you." And she grabbed it and she said, I won't be alone anymore when I have to be here all by myself. I'll have, I'll have, oh, I have to think of a name for her. Jimmie. His heart was full of Christmas joy. He had made his little sister happy. It was better than even a red fire truck. He couldn't believe it, how much better he felt. Now, he thought to himself, I'm the luckiest feller that ever lived. Well, boys and girls, do you know that Jimmie acted just like Jesus would have? Instead of taking something for himself, he got a gift for his little sister so she could be happy. That's just the way Jesus is. Boys and girls, this Christmas, think if you can find somebody to make happy, just like Jesus would and like Jimmie did. Thank you. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.